Right. Hello. We're live. Let me switch off my phone because that apparently gives us a better picture. So what I'll do is I'll just press this thing. I'll have been checking in. That's fantastic. There we go. So lots of primary schools. I can see you all whizzing up the side of my screen. It's great to be talking to you all here. I'm talking to you from... That's where I live. That's where I've lived for the last 25 years, I think. But Scotland is still my favourite place, a great place to be. So what have I got for you? I've got some pictures that I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what I do for a living. And basically, this is what I've got. Look, I'm going to bring up this. Now, this is what I do for a living. You see all these wildlife films you see, well, it's usually quite a lot of it is shot by me. And I do a lot of stuff with David Attenborough and people like that. And what I'm going to show you, if I can get this thing going properly, is I'm going to show you a few pictures. Because I film wildlife a lot of the time. Here I am, filming an elephant. Elephants are pretty cool, particularly the baby elephants. Because the baby elephants are super cool, aren't they? What else do I do? Well, sometimes I do frogs. Frogs. You wouldn't think frogs were very interesting, but actually, you get frogs everywhere. You get them in the freshwaters, you get them in the mountains, you get them in the rivers, you get them in the jungles, all that sort of stuff. It's super cool being a frog. What I like to film most of all, is places where it's cold. Where it's cold, where I can film things like these Arctic foxes. Or if I go to the Antarctic, I can film little fur seals. Very cute little animals. When you film a fur seal, it was a long way away. You set up a tripod and you begin to film little seals. And then what happens? What happens is they come right up next to you. Look at them at the bottom of my tripod. You can see. That's because they live in the Antarctic. And in the Antarctic, the animals are so easy to film. They're so easy to film. They come right up to the camera. Look at that. There's a little seal sitting beside my camera. You can see how small it is, can't you? They're not very big. That seal there is only, only about a month old or so. And the thing is that they're very, very curious. And like we were camping on a beach, and one day I left my tent open. And a tent is a nice, comfy, warm place for a baby seal to go to. And I came back, and that baby seal had gone inside my tent. And you know what baby seals do when they find somewhere nice and comfy and warm to sit out in? They get really comfy and they lie down and they fall asleep. But before they go to sleep, they usually have a pee. So there I was back. I was looking to get some lunch in my tent. It was beginning to rain. So I went inside my tent and there it was. A really strong smell of poo and pee inside my tent that all come from that baby fur seal. So I learned that day, never leave your tent door open. Here's the cutest animal of all. See that? That is my pet Labradoodle. Her name is Tallulah, but I just call her the Doodly because she's a bit of a doodly thing. If you knew her, you would know why I call her the doodly thing. I bet if some of you got pets, some of you got dogs at home, I guess you have dogs or cats. Well, the doodle is a little bit special because she can speak, or at least I can speak to her. When I came here this morning to do this, I said to her, she didn't look very well. I said to her, how are you feeling, doodly thing? And she said to me, she looked up and she said, rough. And I said, oh, you feel a little bit rough, do you, doodly thing? Well, don't worry, I'll come back tonight. I'll bring you some extra food and we can have a good time. So it's good fun talking to the doodly thing. Sometimes I film things like chimpanzees. This was filmed at a chimpanzee orphanage out in Africa, where they have all these chimpanzees that used to be pets or maybe in circuses, and nobody wants them anymore. So one of the coolest things that we got to do was there was a little orphan chimp in there, and the orphan chimp was too small to go out. He was too small to go out with the bigger chimps. So he used to stay in his own little area at the orphanage. And for about an hour every day, it was my job and Sue's job, who was helping me. It was our job to go in and play with Mac, make sure that Mac was happy in the orphanage. So here we are. Here's Sue with Mac, having a chance to play with him. It was really, really good fun. Mac was just a super, super little chimp. We had such a good time with him. Now, I don't just film topside. I don't just spend my time topside. Sometimes I have to go into the water and film things under the water. What do you think is the most exciting thing that you could film underwater? The most exciting, maybe the most dangerous thing? Well, you know how if you go to the zoo, they have to be kept in cages because they're very, very dangerous. Well, when you go underwater, there's sometimes animals which are so dangerous that you have to stay inside the cage. And what do you think I could be filmed to be that dangerous? What animal could be so dangerous that you have to stay inside a cage? You're absolutely right. I bet you're all shouting out, "Shark, shark, shark, it's a shark." And here it is. Here's a shark. This is a great white shark, one of the biggest sharks out there. And that's the one that you can see coming to you. That's the one that you have to keep very careful of when you go into it. Now, I have got a question here. I've got a question from Connor, who's in Bigger Primary School, P45. Connor asks, what is the biggest fish that I've ever seen? Well, Connor, I can tell you what the biggest fish is I've ever seen. The fish that I've ever seen is this one. Look at this one. Do you know what this is? This is a whale shark. Now, it's not a whale, it's a shark. There's a better view of it. It's not a whale, it's a shark. It's the biggest fish, but it can be as big as some whales, and that's why it's called a whale shark. That whale shark can be 10 meters long, and it can weigh maybe 30 tons. 30 tons. That's like 30 minis. Anybody whose mum or dad drives a mini, well, put 30 of them together, and that's how much one of these fish weighs. Amazing. They're great. There's another picture of it. Look, see how it's got a funny big mouth on it. Now, the thing is with the whale shark is that it might be the biggest fish in the sea, but it feeds on tiny, tiny little plankton, tiny little animals that live in the sea. That's what the whale shark feeds on. It glides through the water, pardon me, it moves through the water with that big, big mouth open, and all the water comes into its mouth like that, and it goes out through its gills on the side, and the little particles of food get filtered out. So the biggest animal, biggest fish in the sea feeds on tiny, tiny little things that you would be too small to see if you were swimming. Now, someone else asks me, the Isabel Mayer School in East Renfrewshire, there's a question came in from there. It says, what is the most interesting thing you have seen when you're diving? Well, here's the most interesting thing that I've seen when I'm diving. Here it is here. It's a whale. Now, this is a real whale, not a whale shark. This is a real whale, the biggest mammal in the world. Why do I like filming whales? Well, I'll tell you why. Whales are mammals like us. We are all mammals. We belong to a group of animals called mammals. And when I get a whale coming towards me, I don't know what character is going to be, what his personality is going to be. It might be a little bit frightened. It might be a little bit aggressive. It certainly will need some time to get to know me. And so when I'm in the water with whales, I really like swimming around with them and slowly, slowly getting to know the whales. That's what makes them really, really exciting. That's why I like swimming with whales. And sometimes, you know, the whale comes so close. So look, you can look right into its eye. Now that whale eye there, that whale eye is about the same size as a grapefruit. So it's maybe about maybe that sort of size. When you look into the eyes of a whale, you can't talk to the whale. Boy, when you have it eye to eye and just a meter away, almost close enough to touch, there's a whole lot of feel go between you and the whale. Just like if you meet a friendly dog. If you meet a dog and you're not quite sure of it, spend a bit of time with it, let it sniff your hand, let it get to know you, and then you make friends with that dog. It's the same when you're swimming with whales in the sea. It's really, really exciting when you're with them. Someone else, Karen from Bigger, she asks, is filming scary? Well, let's look at this. I would say that sometimes it's kind of pretty big animals, and they certainly might, they might attack you. So you have to, when you're near polar bears, we carry a special flare gun when we're close to polar bears. So if it comes close to us and it looks as though it might be a little bit dangerous, we've got this special gun which fires an explosive flare, and that goes out, and then the polar bear usually gets chased away. What we don't want to do, we don't want to harm the polar bear. That's why we don't want to use guns or rifles or anything that could injure the polar bear. And we want to be able to just get away with a big bang. The hairiest thing, let me tell you, the hairiest thing that ever happened to me was when I was grabbed by a walrus. I was snorkeling, I was swimming in the sea. Suddenly something grabbed me round about the thighs, and I looked down and there was a walrus. A walrus had come up from the depths and had taken me with its flippers round about my legs, and I swam around and I hit it as hard as I could, and luckily it swam away. And it was a good job because, that's how walrus hunt seals. They attack the seals in the water. They look for a seal thing just bobbing up and down in the water, and they swim underneath it, and they come up and they grab the seal and they take it down into the depths. And that's what had tried to do me, but luckily hitting it on the head meant that it swam away. So that was, really, really lucky, because I'll let you into a little secret. I'll tell you how the walrus kills the seal. It grabs the seal and it takes its head, and the walrus puts its lips onto the seal's head, and then it goes and it sucks the seal's brains out. Not very nice for the seal, and not very nice for me if I had been caught in the same position. So that was kind of lucky. That's probably the hairiest thing that's ever happened to me. Look, I'll show you how big polar bears are. How many people come to school in a bus? Well, have you ever seen that happen to you? Probably not. That polar bear is at the side of a bus and it's looking in. Somebody maybe inside had a bacon sandwich or maybe a cup of coffee, and the polar bear smelled it and then came out and, did some yum yum munchies. So just a couple more things. Angus from Bigger Primary in Glasgow. Angus asks, how long does it take you to plan to film a Blue Planet programme? Well, these big series take about 2 years to film, 2.5 to 3 years. We have the idea, we spend a lot of time researching all the stories, then we have 2 years to film it, and then maybe 6 months to edit it together. So there's a lot of effort, 2.5 years. And apparently, Missy's good lad from Isabel Mayer Primary School, Mrs. She really wishes she could be a wildlife photographer or a marine biologist. Can she have a job? Well, I would say, I think Mrs. sounds like a very good teacher. So my advice would be, stick if I can get you a job. You can come with me. Let me just get some things about plastics. So I've seen, lots of exciting things. I've been very lucky. I've travelled around the world and I've seen all these exciting animals. And sometimes you see animals eating other animals. Sometimes you see maybe animals that are, life isn't easy for an animal. Life isn't easy at all for an animal. And sometimes you see animals hunt animals, and sometimes that can, be a little bit upsetting, but I mean, really, as long as it's a natural event, it doesn't bother me, to watch animals hunt each other. But what does bother me is when I go into the water, for example, and see a seal like that. A seal with a fishing net tangled round about its body. Or I might go and see a turtle, with its tummy full of plastic or something like that. That's what upsets me. So that's what's sad. That's what's sad about litter in the oceans, is because our litter is causing a lot of harm to the natural environment. So Hillington Primary in Glasgow, Hillington Primary P7B and 6A, they're asking me, how does the plastic get into the ocean? How does the plastic end up in our oceans? Casey and Carmen were asking me that. And then also from Hillington, another question, Nikki was wondering, she says, how much plastic is in the ocean and how many animals die because of it? And then also Uplaw Moor Primary, they asked that as well. They said, roughly how many species are affected by marine litter? Well, let me tell you in the first bit, how does the plastic get into the oceans? Well, here's the story of a piece of litter. A piece of litter that you might see on the edge of the road next to your school. The wind can blow, and the wind lifts the litter and takes it and drops it into the nearby river. Or maybe there's a big lot of rain, and the piece of litter gets washed down the gutter and into the drain. And the drain then empties into the river. And your piece of litter bobs down the river into the open sea. And that's how it ends up in the sea. Basically, all litter starts somebody dropping it. Sometimes somebody really bad might deliberately throw the rubbish into the river. That's even worse. But the main thing that it comes from is just people not thinking enough, people discarding their litter. In terms of how much there is, well, it's kind of almost impossible to imagine. But the figures that I got here are that 10 million tons of plastic junk goes into the ocean every single year. Now, when you work out how much that is, that means that roughly 750 tons of plastic, of rubbish, is dumped into the oceans every single. Now, 750 tons, that's the same as 23 big buses. So if you see the buses lined up outside the school, imagine those buses, that 23 of those buses, that weight of litter goes into the sea every single hour. And that's an awful lot of rubbish. And we've been doing this for far too many years. And that's what we need to get it. And some of the places, whoops, are really, the litter is terrible. This is India, for example. Here's a street by a river, by a town in India. And the kids there, they play on little boats. They go out and play around in boats on these rivers. They make boats out of bits of plastic, bits of polystyrene, and they go and they paddle around in that terrible, terrible waste. Now, it's not quite as bad as that here, but the problem is that we put litter into the oceans here, and then the litter floats away to somewhere else. So that's why litter from outside your school plastic litter could end up miles and miles away in another continent, because it lasts a long, long time. I've got another question here from Thomas Muir Primary in Eastern Barton. What's the most common form of litter found in the oceans and the coasts? Well, the commonest litter is plastic bottles. Plastic bottles make up a huge amount of litter. Every year there are beach cleans. People go out and they clean the beaches and they make a note of the kind of stuff that they're finding. And plastic bottles, stuff from foodstuffs. We spend an awful lot, we wrap a lot of plastic round about our food. And some of this is completely unnecessary. We could use paper, or we could just not use so much packaging. So most of the kinds of litter comes from plastic bottles, grocery bags, food wrappings, things like that. St Mary's Primary in Glasgow, they asked me, of all the oceans and seas that you have filmed for Blue Planet, which would you say are the worst? Well, I have to say that the Indian Ocean, which has India on one side of the map and around the Arabic countries and then down through Africa. The ocean there is probably the dirtiest, unfortunately, because a lot of rubbish comes down the river from India, from the African countries, and it all tends to collect together in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And there was a lovely place called Chagos that I visited, tropical island, just absolutely in the middle of nowhere, not another island for hundreds and hundreds of miles, and yet the amount of plastic on that beach was terrible. There was a huge amount of plastic there, and it made me very, very sad to see how much litter also there was. But also, I looked around it. I could find, bottles with Chinese writing on them. I could find bottles with French writing on it. I could find bottles with Indian writing. So obviously, all this litter had come from a huge area. That's the trouble. The ocean, things that we put into the ocean, stuff that starts in your village, in the river that runs near to your village, that runs down the Clyde, that rubbish can go long, long, long way away. And it can last a long, long time. A long, long time. The worst kind of pollution, I was asked, Isabel Mayer School in Renfrewshire said, what's the worst type of pollution? Well, I would say that all pollution is pretty bad. The problem with plastics is that they last such a long time. But, sometimes you put something into the water and the chemicals, the way it dissolves, means that bad stuff goes, harmful chemicals go into the water. So that's not a good idea. One of the things about plastics is that you throw some plastic into a river, and a lot of it will just stay the same shape. You put a plastic bottle into the water, it might look like a plastic bottle in 20, 30, 50 years' time. Other kinds of plastic breaks down, it just starts to go into small pieces that are so small that we can't see them. We call them microplastics. But just because they're micro and tiny doesn't mean they're not there. And the thing is that these microplastics can cause a lot of problems to the various animals. There are some animals which feed on very small plastics. Remember the manta? Remember the what was that? I showed you the whale shark. Remember the whale shark? It glides through the water with that big mouth. Well, if it's gliding through the surface waters and there's lots of little microplankton in there, the animal is swallowing the microplankton. And we don't exactly know what effect that has, but it's pretty safe to bet it's not a good for the animal to do. So big lump of plastic becomes small, tiny pieces of plastic, and those bits of plastic still persist for many, many years, and they can still carry on doing quite a lot of damage. In terms of how different plastic affect the animals, well, sometimes they swallow them and it's poisonous. Other times it can, wrap round about the animal, for example, the net round about the seal. Other times the animal might confuse. It'll think that the piece of plastic is something to eat, like turtles, for example. They feed on jellyfish, and to a turtle, a big piece of plastic floating in the water looks a little bit like a jellyfish, so the turtle will begin to eat it. Sometimes pieces of plastic are caught by the animals in the water, and then it's taken back and they feed them to their chick. So, for example, look at this. This is terrible. Look, here's a chick. This is a dead bird. And this chick was being raised on the nest and it was being fed all these bits of plastic that the adult had picked up by mistake. So in the end, the little bird died because it wasn't getting proper food. It was getting just, fed to by who didn't know the difference. They're attracted to light, shiny things swimming in the water, and that's what happens. Matthew, he asked, how does plastic make animals feel like when they're full? Well, I wouldn't suggest trying this, but, you could, if you were to eat things which aren't necessarily food, as long as your tummy feels full, then, you feel full. You could be eating things that were poisonous and not good for you, but you would still feel full. And these animals are just accustomed to, the way a bird feeds, it just takes all its food directly from its mum And that's how it goes. Plastic takes a long, long time. I've had a number of Hillington Primary, for example, Lauren there. She's asking, Oscar, why does plastic take to decompose? You know, how many years does it take? Well, you see, plastic is not natural. When a leaf falls on the ground, falls out of a tree, falls on the ground, there are tiny little animals, bacteria, which will come and they'll eat the leaf, and the leaf disappears. But when you drop something like a piece of plastic, is not natural. It was created, 50 years ago by human beings, and natural animals can't eat plastic. So plastic takes a long, long time to decompose. It's basically, we made plastic to last a long time. We like the fact that it lasts a long time, and so it lasts when it goes into the environment. Animals are just animals around who can eat the plastic. There are some machines that we've got for collecting plastic, early stages. They put out these big booms, these big nets in the water, and they move slowly through the water, nets on plastic, but they're not very efficient, to be honest. And the best thing, what we have to do, and this is what it comes back to, what we have to do is stop the plastic going in there in the first place. And that's what I would like all you to take away the message for. Just don't throw things, don't just out of the habit of dropping litter. It's dead easy. Just when you see a piece of litter or when you have something you want to throw away, keep it in your hands, put it in your pocket, maybe carry a plastic bag with you, take it to somewhere, take it to a where you can dispose properly. Because if you just drop it in the road, an adult dropping it in the road, that litter is going to end up in our natural world. And if it's a piece of plastic, it will last a long, 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 long time. It's going to cost a lot of money to get rid of all the plastic in the world. That will be a long, long job. In the meantime, people, the supermarkets are deciding to use less plastic. People are trying to live without using any plastic. And that's what we should all be trying to do. That's what we should all be trying to live with less plastic and to stop littering, because throwing away that plastic, that's where the biggest problem is. I'm going to end up with, I think, is the greatest question from the best question came from, where is it? Came from, hold on a minute, I'm with you. Where am I? Question 7, where is it? Oh, I think it came from Max. I'm going to say it came from Max. Hold on 1 minute while I look through my papers one more time. This is taking too long, isn't it? Basically, I think it was Max. I'm sorry if I don't remember your name. What Max asks was, if we all know about the question, how come people are still throwing away litter? And that, Max, is a great, great question, because I don't know the answer to that. All I can say is that it's just habit. It's bad habits that people have got into. It's bad habits that I'm hoping you and me and everyone else can break. I'm hoping we can persuade other people to break, so that we end up without any going onto the streets, without it getting washed down the drains, without it ending up in the rivers, so that we end up with clean rivers running into the sea. If we can have clean rivers running into the sea, then we wouldn't have all the pollution in the sea. We wouldn't have turtles choking on plastic bags. We wouldn't have seabirds dying because they've got plastic inside them. The seas would be a clean, healthy place. I don't know about you, but I want to go to the beach and find, that it's nice and clean. I don't want to go to the beach and find it all covered with litter like that, because that is how some beaches are around UK. There's not much fun going there and spending the day there, is there? So that's it, almost for me. I want to thank you all for coming in and listening. If you've enjoyed it, then we can maybe do the same again. I'm sorry I didn't get through quite as well. I didn't mention as many people. We had lots and lots of great questions from all of you, and I want to thank you all for sending in your questions. I've tried to answer them, but we can have another session sometime, and I can try and answer the other questions that you may have. But in the meantime, Thank you all for listening. This is for Connor. Look, remember? See, I've even got a whale shark on front of my shirt. And in fact, I've got lots of wildlifey things. Look, drinking out of my special cup, my special glass, which has got penguins on it. And good. That's all I have to say to you guys. Thank you all very much for